The sun was warm, and the breeze blowing gently through camp at regular intervals was cool and comfortable. Percy sat at the edge of the dock, his feet dangling inches above the surface of the canoe lake, watching with only mild interest a group of younger campers struggling with a canoe lesson at the other end, while their instructor, a son of Hermes, called encouragement out to them. No one paid him any attention. It was August 7th, just a few days before the end of the summer term, the last summer term Percy would spend here before leaving for college in New Rome. The thought was a weird one. The idea of growing up, of going to college, of moving away. A few short years ago, the idea that he would make it as far as simply graduating high school would have seemed a miracle. Never mind the thought that he would have the chance to live a peaceful life for a while, without looming wars or evil powers trying to take over the world. That would have seemed completely impossible. Like the notion that he and Annabeth would one day be dating once had. So much had changed. Thinking back on it all now, a year after the events of the Second Great Prophecy, and almost 2 years since the events of the first, Percy was struck by just how lucky he really was. With all the times he had almost died since the age of 12, 2 vicious wars, a trip through Tartarus, it was a wonder he was here at all. Thoughts like this had crossed his mind more and more often as time went by. He wasn't sure if the reality that the peace was for real this time was finally sinking in, or if it was just a side effect of getting older. Either way, he had a lot to be thankful for. In just a few weeks now, he and Annabeth would be leaving New York and heading to California to attend the university in New Rome. Percy had wanted to do this since he'd first learned of New Rome's existence, and had thought of doing so as a possibility for them. Now that it was actually happening, though, he found himself thinking about it more and more. He still loved the idea of enjoying 4 years with Annabeth, without the constant threat of monsters and deadly battles. But he wished it were a bit closer to home. If for no other reason than because his sister had only been born a few months ago, and he wanted to see her grow up. Still, he supposed he had a life to live, and a girl with whom he wanted to live it. And he really wanted a break from fighting monsters. Like, really wanted it. The light tread of footsteps on the dock behind him alerted him to the presence of someone else. But he didn't turn around right away. A moment later, a pair of familiar arms snaking around his neck, along with the lemon scent they brought with them, cleared up any uncertainty he may have had as to the identity of the visitor. "There you are," Annabeth's voice said in his ear. "Were you looking for me?" he asked. "Not for long," she answered, moving now to sit next to him. "You always gravitate toward the water." Percy smirked. "I can't imagine why." "Me neither." She looked at him. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said, meeting her eyes. "Just thinking." Annabeth raised an eyebrow slightly. "About?" He shrugged. "The future. The past too, I guess, that I'm really lucky." She smirked. "You're the one always saying how unlucky you are." "I thought I was," he said. "But I was thinking about it, and I've honestly lost count of how many times I was supposed to die and didn't. And how I've got my mom and Paul and my sister now, and you especially." He met her eyes. "And how good everything is right now." Annabeth was quiet for a second. "Well," she said, "I don't know about everything else, but I know that you have me because of a lot more than just luck." Percy smiled. "I don't turn down scholarships from NYU for just anyone, you know?" Percy met her eyes. "You know you could have gone to school in the city if you wanted to." "I don't want to. I want to be with you, and if that means we're going to New Rome, then I'm happy to do that." She eyed him. "You do still want to go there, don't you?" Because if you say no, seaweed brain, I will kill you.
Of course I do. I mean, I'm going to miss my family like crazy, but I want to not have to worry about monsters chasing us constantly. I don't want to hide, and I want to be with you. And you said it's a good school.
It is. Their architecture program is amazing, Annabeth said with a smile. And, yeah, the no monster thing is a huge bonus. She sighed and looked around at the half-bloods going about their day around camp. It's not going to be the same, though. I've gotten so used to coming here whenever I want. Percy nodded in agreement and put an arm around her.
The Romans are great, but Camp Half-Blood will always be home.
She rested her head against his shoulder. Yeah, exactly.
For the record though, if you had wanted to stay in New York for college, I would have stayed with you.
I know, she smiled. I'm never getting rid of you, am I?
That depends. Do you want to?
She pretended to think about it. No, I think I'll keep you around.
Thanks.
She looked at him, serious now. I love you, Percy.
I love you too,
he said and kissed her, unconcerned with the fact that anyone could have seen them. Frankly, it was a wonder they hadn't already been interrupted. I'm glad I stayed in New York this year, she said when they separated.
Me too.
It really has been the best school year I've ever had, said Annabeth after a minute. But I think it might be nice to be so close to family for a while. She met his eyes. To have you with me close to them.
Yeah, it will, Percy agreed. And it will give me a chance to get to know them all better. It's probably time I did that anyway.
She smiled, looking at him. You want to get to know my family better?
Sure I do. The last time I saw any of them in person was when we were trying to rescue you from Luke.
Annabeth, smirking, said, You mean when you were?
Percy smiled. Thalia and Zoe helped. You just weren't their only priority.
I know, she said simply, taking his hand and intertwining their fingers.
Anyway, since you're going to keep me around...
He glanced sideways at her. She smiled.
I figured I should get to know your family officially. I've been dating you for 2 years now. It's probably the right thing to do.
Percy, you fell into Tartarus with me. Even without my family's approval, I would stay with you. Not that it matters anyway, they love you.
Well, that's good. It will probably make things easier in the future.
For what?
You know, like when I marry you.
He said it casually, without really thinking.
Even so, his heart rate skipped with nerves as the words left his mouth.
Annabeth looked at him in surprise for a few seconds. You want to marry me? She asked finally.
Yeah, of course I do, Percy replied. Someday. Why wouldn't I?
He'd never spoken the words outright before, but they talked about the future. It had been his intention for a while now to marry her one day. She continued to stare at him, looking shocked before, slowly, her face broke into a beautiful smile, and a second later she was kissing him again. They broke apart before it could become much more than a peck on the lips, as they were in a pretty public place. And Annabeth leaned into him again, still smiling. After a quiet moment, Percy asked,
What are you thinking?
That you're the one person in my life who's consistently stuck around. He wasn't sure how to respond to that, and she spoke up before he could. He could hear the smile in her voice when she added, And that I'm really glad I decided to go to New Rome with you.
So am I,
Percy told her. Behind them, the conch horn sounded, signaling it was time for lunch. Annabeth sighed lightly and then moved to stand. Come on, she said. Let's enjoy our time here while we still have it. Percy followed her up easily, though his expression had turned slightly mischievous as he looked at her. Don't you dare, she told him flatly. Push me in the lake, Percy Jackson, and I will make you a very miserable person. They stared at each other for a few seconds, Percy smirking, Annabeth severe. "I'm serious," she said, but cracked at the end and smiled. Percy grinned. "Uh-huh, sure you are," he said, but took her hand and led her back up the dock anyway. After all, he thought, it was better not to push his luck.